Hello and welcome to the June 2nd Parks and Human Services Committee. I am joined today with Council Member Troutner and virtually Council Member Kaur, and I am Council Member Michaud. First of all, do we have any changes to the agenda?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have no changes to the agenda.
Perfect. All right. First order of business then would be the approval of the minutes.
Madam Chair, I move to approve the minutes from the April 7th meeting.
Second.
Any discussion?
Did you want to ask about that change?
We do have, I do have a question about this. We're not sure if someone was remote for the April 7th meeting. Council Member Troutner does not think it was her. Council Member Kaur, were you virtual? No. Okay. So if we change that, then is everyone okay to approve the minutes?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right. Motion passes. Okay. First up with presentations is Terry Jungman to talk about the Parks and Open Space Plan.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, council members. Thanks for having me here this afternoon. Here on the downward slope of our Parks and Open Space Plan process. Really happy to say that out loud. The item we're presenting tonight is an information-only item. It's really a companion item to the public hearing process that is moving in parallel with council adoption. So on June 13th, there will be a meeting with Economic Community Development Committee where we will present the public hearing results. They'll see this exact same presentation, but we wanted to come and present this one to you as well. And then the final item will move forward on the 21st of June for final adoption. So we just wanted you to see this one as that other meeting comes forward. So we'll move through this presentation. A recap of our process. We kind of had the phases lined up. You've seen this slide several times in previous presentations, but a big information collection phase on the front end, all the source documents, other reports that we were referring to, data and analysis across the region and nationwide was pulled in. We did our engagement. We had stakeholder interviews. We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail here in a minute, and all the survey and pop-up events that we had. All that information then feeds into what we called a data crunching phase, and so we were taking all the data that we had gathered and really doing the true analysis. All that analysis then goes into the reporting where we build out the final report that everybody has seen at this point, sort of lining out the items that we have listed here: themes and visions, strategic project list, O&M, funding sources, etc. One final engagement there at the very end. We had our plan posted to engagekentparks.com for public comment for 3 weeks. That has since closed. We've incorporated as many of those comments as we can, and now our plan is final. We've gone through our public hearing process, and like I said, we are nearing the final steps here. In the information collection phase, we looked at the city's demographics. We looked at nationwide recreation trends. We also benchmarked ourselves against some NRPA standards, National Recreation Parks Association standards, taking the engagement into consideration, all the public comment and feedback that we received through that process. And there at the top, you kind of see the steps that we moved through over the last year and a half or so of time. It's been a lot of effort spent on behalf of staff to get us through all of these steps and the various stages of engagement, but we're really proud to say that that number is actually out of date. We're now over 3,000 touch points with the community with all of the feedback that we received through engagekentparks.com in this last phase. We had our survey effort. We had both a statistically valid survey and a general survey. If you'll recall the slide that kind of calls out what the results of our statistically valid survey were and how those demographics were essentially a match to the city's demographics. We're very happy with how that has resulted in feedback through the plan. And just one of many questions that was asked for that survey, but just a reminder of what we heard of what's important to the community are things like nature trails, access to gathering spaces, and access to nature. So those are really the big themes that we heard through the engagement effort. It really kind of boils down to some basic access to recreational need. We also consider other recreational amenity opportunities in that as well. It's not to say that we won't build other things, but it just kind of helps us conceptualize and prioritize where we should be investing our funds. As a reminder, we have a level of service standard that we had established within the 2016 plan. This is called the performance-based level of service. This looks at the recreational value of our parks, not just the land. But as we got into this plan, we also wanted to pair that performance-based LOS with more of a traditional LOS, kind of realizing that reinvest, maintain, and development are part of the solution to a high performance park system, but acquisition is also part of that too. And really, to get to that acquisition strategy, we needed to have more of a traditional look at how much parkland do we have in our system, where do we have that parkland. And so these measures were coupled with all of our GIS data that we built over the last year. If you recall, we went through a full inventory. We have a complete asset inventory at this point that's all been geospatially mapped. All that information has been compiled within our heat mapping that's resulted in the park need maps that we see within the plan. We also did an athletic capacity study. We're looking at nature score as key metrics as we move forward with this plan. Some of the benchmarking data, this is just a summary of that information. You know, the top measure in terms of acres of parkland per 1,000 residents, we're under that mark. I think what this says is that we haven't kept pace with acquisition needs as population has grown. And so if we're going to keep pace with that population growth, we're going to need an acquisition strategy. We do very well on trails. We don't do very well on horizontal field space. This is reflected in our athletic capacity study, that we have good diamond field space. We could probably expand in some key locations, but where we're really deficient in our system is in horizontal field space. And then the cricket field number, obviously we have 0. We do have a practice pitch that was just recently constructed at North Meridian, but that only gets us so far in terms of filling that need. The mapping is really a major component of the plan, something that we're really looking forward to implementing in sort of our day-to-day practices and decision-making on how we make project priority decisions. And so how this information was built is we took all of our GIS asset inventory information, paired it with all of our current recreational value and potential recreational value data. We mapped all of the access points of all the parks, overlaid that with our walk sheds for both a 10 and a 15-minute walk. We also layered in access to transit and transit service. Population density was one of the scoring metrics within the heat mapping, just saying that where higher population densities exist allows us to serve more people, so those projects would have a higher score. And we also layered in racial and social equity as well. And what was built into that racial and social equity mapping layer was race and ethnicity, socioeconomics, and health metrics. So these maps have proven to be very effective at pinpointing places within the city where we have high need for access to recreation, looking both at current recreational value, where we have quality parks today, and potential recreational value where we'll have quality parks tomorrow. All of this information, like I said, allows us to kind of key in on some specific areas, just calling a few of these out. And this is not to say that these are the only places where we need to make investment. We're just kind of saying, based on our first blush look at this data, these are some hot spots that are becoming very clear to us. East Hill North is one we know very well at this point, with the need for acquisition in and around Panther Lake and closer to the Garrison Creek area. In the East Hill South region, we have good parkland, but we're not making very good or efficient use of that parkland in terms of its recreational value. So looking at some redevelopment or development opportunities for parkland that we have in East Hill South and on the West Hill, as we know, through the Midway development and all population density that's expected there, we're going to need to provide some recreational value today. That's currently a desert as it relates to access to recreation in the city. So all this heat mapping information and all the information collection that we have done through the process is then compiled into a set of goals and outcomes that then go into the scoring of the individual projects that gives us a sense of priority of those projects. And so as a reminder of what those goals are: transparency and communication, physical access for all, diversity of high quality amenity, and system resiliency. Those are color coded at the top, and then you can see how each of those goals is tied to a particular outcome. So in the case of access is tied to transparency and communication, and physical access for all, so on and so forth. So just to say that these are intrinsically tied together and was built with that in mind. So that then kind of results in the scoring of the individual projects. We'll talk through each of these lists and what it means, but you can see all of the outcomes out to the right, and the name and the color associated with that dot, and then the projects are scored along those dots. That gives them a value that then results in them being in sort of a near, mid, and long-term classification. Near, mid, and long-term just means that near-term is stuff we're working on right now. Mid-term is going to be sort of those next set of priorities that we will be working on, given the chance to fund them. Long-term has some major obstacle standing in its way, whether it be funding O&M resources to support the development or redevelopment of that project, or major partnership that needs to come to fruition to make those projects possible. And then the column out to the right-hand side, the dollar signs, $1, $2, and $3 signs, really just is intended to symbolize the level of complexity of the project. So $1 sign meaning very low-hanging fruit project, pretty easy to implement. 3 meaning high complexity, high cost, will take quite a bit of time to implement. So just looking at the Westhill region, Salter Vista Park, this is a park we're working on right now. It's actually, we just had our pre-construction meeting for that park this morning, so very excited to see that construction take place this summer. Just kind of looking at some other examples of parks, park projects within this region. The Westhill land acquisition kind of points to the fact that we need to acquire that land in the Midway area, and then kind of looking down on that list, the Westhill Sports Facility Development, that was an idea that was plugged into the athletic capacity study as a potential opportunity to be looking at the Midway landfill as a site for a major sports field development. The downtown region, 4th and Willis Greenway, we've all kind of seen that project and how it's wrapping up. Really pleased with the finished product there. Kherson Park, that's a project we'll be talking about right after this presentation. One we're really excited about moving forward with. Moving into the midterm, just kind of pointing out Riverview and Signature Point. These are projects that are associated with the river and major levee work, and so the reason why those are in the midterm classification is because they're tied to the complexity of those levee projects. And then in the long term, we have Hogan Park and Kent Memorial Park, and the only reason those are really in the long-term category is because of the complexity of doing artificial turf conversions and the costs associated with those projects, but also we know that any moves we make on the athletic side are going to be tied to that partnership that we've been talking about within the context of the capacity study. So we really need to be looking at school district partnership before we be making any major moves or investments within our athletic system. In the Green River region, this is really that which serves the Industrial Valley. Vandoorne's Park, spending a lot of time out there this summer getting that project wrapped up, but very excited to deliver that one. That one's in the near term. And then thinking about the GRNRA kind of out in the future and working on a renewed partnership with Public Works and perhaps a different model of management for that facility really opens up some major opportunities for recreational value within the valley. East Hill South region, Morrow Meadows Park, that's a project that we're looking at construction of this summer, so that one's in the near term. Springwood Park we also put in the near term, so that one's moving through a grant cycle right now through RCO. Clark Lake Park, that one's in the midterm because we know that the potential recreational value of that site is very high and allows us to serve a lot of residents within the East Hill broadly. So that's one we want to be moving forward with a master plan pretty quickly on. And then those projects that reside in the long term, I'll just point out 132nd Avenue and 272nd Park. The reason those are in the long term is because that's new development. This is parks that don't exist today, that if we are going to move forward with them would really need some kind of major O&M funding source tied to those so that we're not building something we can't maintain. And then in the East Hill North region, we kind of know these projects because we've been talking about them a lot over the last several months, but Chestnut Ridge, that construction's wrapping up this month. I would point out in the midterm, we're looking at East Hill North, which is the Matt and Juicy property. That's one that is a high need area. You can see it there in yellow right underneath Panther Lake. And then East Hill North Park Development, East Hill North Community Park, aka the Hughes property, that's one that's moving through the master plan process right now, so we have that one in the near term as well. Talking about funding, we moved through this slide relatively quickly last time, but just to kind of capture it again, right now in terms of current funding that we're receiving through our capital budget, we get $6 million roughly per year. If we are going to implement all of the projects within this plan, that would include both capital renovation and new development, we would need an additional $4 million per year. So we would need about $1 million of additional funding for the renovation side of those projects, and then $3 million to do the capital development side of those projects. That does not include acquisition. Acquisition is a separate need that's not covered under this funding ask. On the O&M side, if we are going to implement all of the projects within this plan, our current O&M funding is approximately $7 million per year. And we would need, if we were going to implement all those projects, we would need $3 million over 20 years, which results in approximately $300,000 every other year, which is roughly 1 FTE per budget cycle. So again, just to kind of capture that, if we are going to move forward to all these projects, we would need about 1 FTE per budget cycle, aka every other year, to keep pace with all the new improvements, expansion, higher levels of use within our park system that's coupled with all the capital renovation and development work that we're proposing in this plan. And just a reminder of the graph to the right, if we keep all of these items funded proportionally in the proper way, we have a high functioning system. As any one of these items, either O&M funding, capital funding is dropped, then the recreational value is going to be dropped as it relates to that. Capturing our process up to this point and beyond today, we had our Parks Commission presentation back in January of 22. We also had a council workshop presentation in February of 22. That was kind of our first look at the plan. We talked a lot about mapping kind of as a core component of that presentation and talking about process moving forward. Most recently, we've had land use and planning board presentation on 4/22. We had another council workshop presentation on 5/22. Land use and planning board hearing on 5/23. Parks Committee presentation on 6/2. Thanks, Julie, for covering that one. Economic and Community Development Committee is coming up on 6/13, and with our final council adoption currently on the schedule for 6/21. So that would be the final vote for this plan that would adopt it into our comprehensive plan via amendment, and then we would be able to pass that forward to RCO for adoption, and that would make us eligible for the current round of grant funding, which we have 4 projects in the mix for. So it's a pretty big deal that we're getting this in time to be able to hit that grant cycle, as it's a lot of potential funding for us to receive. Talking about some next steps on this plan, we were just today kind of working through our story map, which is really intended to be kind of a Cliff Notes version of the plan, taking all the highlights, important points, and interactive maps that we built and putting them into an online platform that's easy for people to digest and read. So we're going to be building that. That'll be hosted on our website. We'll be moving forward with asset management, kind of taking all the GIS inventory and geospatial data that we've built out and kind of moving into a next phase of O&M sophistication and understanding that side of the house better. We've talked about additional funding for both operating and capital. Nature score methodology is something we kind of started to work on, but we know we need to finish and really move forward as access to nature was one of the high scores in terms of recreational needs within the city. We're going to be working on a comprehensive goals and policies update that's department-wide. We did hire a full-time GIS position. That person actually just started yesterday, so really excited to get them back on board and help us carry a lot of these initiatives forward that we've started in this plan. Partnership with the Kent School District. Julie and other staff within the department, are going to be working on a park strategic framework plan that's going to wrap all of our plans up into one strategic framework plan. It's going to be a really important step for the department, and finally looking towards a CAPRA accreditation in the next few years as an important milestone. So that's my best effort to try and wrap up this year-and-a-half long process in about 10 minutes. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Are there any questions? Anyone? Okay. Councilmember Troutner and I are going to hear this next week, right? Yeah.
Yep, on Monday.
Yeah. At the next meeting. Do you know when Vandoorne's is going to open?
It's a great question. I know about as much as anyone about that project, and it's a little bit of a moving target with us not being in control of the construction phase. Remember, that is a project that's managed by King County as part of the levy. I think it's going to be done towards the end of this summer, probably into the early fall is my best guess at this time.
Okay. Well, I said it before, but thank you to the department. Thank you to you, Terry, for presenting this. I'm hoping that other departments will look at this plan and see all the public engagement and how GIS was used to address equity issues. I hope that they will learn some lessons from this, because it really is the standard now.
Thanks.
So, thank you. All right. Okay, we're going to move on to Croissant Park.
Okay, great. Moving right along. Again, an information-only item. We're really just coming as a courtesy to the bid award that's going to be brought to council next week. We think this is a really important project, and we just kind of wanted to give a reminder and a refresh of what is in this project, and so there's a more comprehensive understanding of the cost associated with this project and what it's building. So just moving into this. Wanted to remind everybody about the STEM event that we had back in November of 2019. I think this is something, because so much time has passed between now and then, that we've forgotten about, but it was a really successful event. We had 1,000 people come out to the ShoWare Center, all sorts of partners that were there with us to celebrate the Lunar rover replica and the astronaut. It was really a fantastic event, something I think that the community really rallied around, and it was really the start of a build-up towards this project. So this is just a couple of pictures from that event. And it's just really cute to see kids, sort of climbing on the astronaut and on the lunar rover, and the Star Wars cosplay people in the background. So just wanted to give a reminder of that event. Here's a site plan of the overall park. You've got Gow Street there on the south side, 2nd Avenue on the east side. The primary, does this work? Yeah, so the primary play area is located right here. So this is where you're going to see the lunar rover and the astronaut. On the west side, mission control element will be here. The lunar lander, the primary play element will be located here. There will be some sort of day use and picnicking areas that will be here and here. Open lawn space, small event space here, and then the pathway circulation that kind of cuts through the center of the park right there. So that's just kind of a refresh of the overall site plan and what is situated where. We'll look at the individual elements. This is a perspective drawing that's looking from that southeast corner into the park, looking over at the backdrop of the lunar rover and the astronaut. The lunar lander play structure, this is kind of the primary piece, the flagship piece that's going to be the play element. This is one that's being designed with all of the play standards in mind, and so it's going to have full safety surfacing and everything around it. But it's a really cool structure. I wouldn't call it a replica, but it's really close actually to what the actual lunar lander looked like. The size is not quite the same. It's intended to be more of a kid scale piece, but really happy with the sort of the color and material selection, the way that's turned out. And then so you can see the ladder coming up on the backside. The interior has all sorts of, not actual gadgets, but it's stickers that kind of give you a sense of being inside of a little control space with a ladder that actually goes up to the top. So you'll be able to poke your head up out of the top of that structure and then slide out of the front of it. There's going to be a communications piece between the lunar lander and the mission control, so you can imagine kids who are standing at mission control talking to other kids who are standing inside of the lunar lander, so that's kind of a fun thing. But there's some other elements within the mission control panel. Those dots that you see on the front panel, that's actually going to be the game Simon. Do you remember the game Simon, where there's colors and patterns? You'll be able to play that game on the front of the mission control. And then there's other elements that are a little bit more of a realistic look at what people actually saw in mission control. You can kind of see that with the screens there. So those are kind of fun play elements. Looking over to the west side of the park, so there currently today there's the gravel lot that's there to the west side, and then those two perspective drawings that you see just below that kind of give you a sense of what that's going to look like. Definitely the one down here gives you a sense of what that backdrop will look like with the parking lot on the other side, and then you can kind of see the lunar rover replica here and the astronaut there. Let's look at those a little bit closer. So someone on my staff, Michael Espinan, has been working diligently to get the absolute best still photography that we can get of the moon surface. And so I'm going to just kind of read the notes that he gave to me. We're actually able to get these images from the crew chief for the current Mars lunar rover. So this person has, and it's all public information, but it has the ability to sort of access all the photography that's available online. And these images were stitched together from several photographs of the moon's surface to show the moonscape. And these are actual images from the lunar mission that had a Washington resident associated with it, and is the mission in which our rover was modeled after. So there's a lot of significance to the photography that we're using to model the moon surface that will then go into the backdrop there. The backdrop is this polycarbonate wall, so it's essentially a dense polymer. It's used in sound transit facilities, so it kind of passed all the sniff tests in terms of resiliency and vandalism and that sort of thing. And so it's something we're really proud of. It has a lot of thought that's going into it, and it's going to serve as the backdrop for the lunar rover replica and the astronaut. Moving on to the wall projection system, this is also something we're really excited about. There's a lot of cool elements in this park. But we have a big blank wall on the north side of the park. That's the Rain Hair Salon building. That wall is in really good condition, actually. And so we went out and conducted a test of projection onto that wall with the consultant that's working with us. It's a projection consultant out of Seattle who specializes in this kind of work. And we actually ran that test, and we have a video to show you. So this is video footage of us projecting onto that wall. It's not even nighttime yet, so it's not fully dark yet, but the picture clarity that we're able to achieve on this wall with no treatments, it's just a painted wall in its current condition, is pretty remarkable. And so we're going to be installing a projector. Let me go back actually and point out where that projector piece is. So the projector will be located roughly here underneath the tree and then projecting onto the wall surface this direction. So really excited about that, working on getting all that stuff in a right cabinet and vandal proof so that it can't be stolen, obviously, but those are all things that we're really confident and going to be working through the course of the project. So getting to the punchline here, how did we land in terms of the bid? The engineer's estimate on this project was $950 to $1.15 million. The bid summary that we got back, Green Tech Excavation is our apparent low bidder with $1.6 million. LW Sundstrom, that was actually the low bid for the Salter Vista project, bid the project at $1.76 million. And A1 Landscaping and Construction bid the project at just over $2 million. So what are the factors that drive some of the costs on this project? We're currently experiencing the highest inflation that we've had in over 31 years. That's been a big driver in the construction market, and I think that you're going to see this with a lot of construction bids that are coming back here in the next 6 to 12 months. Fuel costs are the highest they've ever been. We bid this project during a concrete strike, and so that affects bid pricing as well. There's supply chain challenges. We're in an urban site location, so the access to the site is constrained and limited, so there's always going to be a premium that's associated with building on those kinds of sites. COVID-19 affects everything at this point. Its impacts are not quite fully understood, and so we know that that's driving pricing on this project as well. Just as a percentage, the low bid on this project was approximately 25% over our engineer's estimate. The high bid was 40% over that engineer's estimate. Our bid, in our base bid, includes a $75,000 item for small changes, which is basically like a small contingency fund that we can operate within. So we feel really good about 1.6 being the final cost on this because we're giving ourselves space to deal with unforeseen conditions that are going to pop up on site. So that's a good thing that we've been building into a lot of our projects as we move forward. And then just as a point of comparison with our consultant team that's working with us on this project, there were 4 other projects that they have bid all between 10 and 47% over their estimate. So this is a trend that we're just kind of seeing is happening more and more recently. We've also had some really good bids that have come back. If you recall, Chestnut Ridge was under budget, so it was under the engineer's estimate. Salter Vista was right at budget. West Fenwick was roughly right at budget. So we've had a pretty good run. I think it's only a matter of time before you get back a bid that's going to be a bit higher than what you're anticipating. We've also checked all the references on the Green Tech Excavation, and all the references were very positive. So they're a great contractor to work with, and so they've kind of passed that test as well. So we're ready to move forward with them as the low bid contractor for this project, and that'll be coming to you next week. Happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Troutner?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Will you remind me, did we do some fundraising for this park or to have some of the things displayed at the park? Did we get anything for that?
You are recalling that correctly. I think it was always the intention to do some kind of fundraising or capital campaign for this project, but my understanding of the capital campaign right now is that is more so focused towards long-term programming of the site for STEM and STEM-based programming and types of education. It's not going to assist in any way on the construction or capital side of this project, is what I know.
Thank you, Terry. Yeah, I was going to ask about that too. I do remember that discussion. I'm really excited about this project and the level of detail that's being put into it. I think it's going to be really great for downtown.
Agreed. Thanks for your time.
Yep. Okay, up next we have Will Moore to talk about an amendment to the T-Mobile lease at 400 West Gow.
All right, good evening, council members. So this one is fairly straightforward, should be very quick. At Centennial Center, 400 West Gow, we do have a T-Mobile cell site over there. The lease has expired and needs to be renewed. And so since March 1st of 2001, the city has leased the premises to T-Mobile for that cell site. This amendment extends the current lease for an additional 5 years and includes a rent increase to $3,000 per month. Just some context, the previous rent was $2,160 a month, and then they do pay utilities of $100 for electric, and then it's a 3% annual increase for the next 5 years. So with that, looking for the mayor to authorize this lease amendment for T-Mobile.
Okay, can I get a motion?
Madam Chair, I move to authorize the mayor to execute a fifth amendment to the lease agreement with T-Mobile at 400 West Gow, extending the lease 5 years with 2 additional 5-year extension options, subject to final terms and conditions acceptable to the Parks Director and City Attorney.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 All right, motion passes. Okay, up next, Will.
Okay, the second one I have here is for a co-op agreement with the Hahn Company. So for this, Hahn is our furniture supplier, just for some context. And so Omnia Partners Public Agencies is a cooperative purchasing organization for public sector procurement. In 2018, Omnia Partners merged National Intergovernmental Purchasing Alliance Company with U.S. Communities to become the nation's largest co-op purchasing organization in the public sector procurement. The City of Kent had previously been a member of each of those separate entities and is now a member of Omnia Partners. Through this purchasing co-op, the public agency competitively bids and negotiates a master agreement to be used by that lead public agency and other public agencies who are members of the purchasing co-op. It is often more advantageous for the city to purchase through these co-ops, as a purchasing power and cooperative allows the lead agency to negotiate more favorable terms for the city and will likely receive negotiating on its own. Purchases through the purchasing co-op are exempt from competitive bid requirements under KCC 3.70.110.f. And so we've been utilizing this purchasing co-op up to the mayor's purchasing authority of $100,000, and we're getting close to that limit. And so I'm here tonight to ask for approval to continue to use the Omnia purchasing agreement for future furniture needs through Hahn.
Thanks so much, Will. I think we are all familiar with this sort of thing. Does anyone have any questions before we move on? Oh, yes, Councilmember Kaur.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the summary, there's after 3.70.110.f dot isn't there? Is that part of the code?
No, I'm sorry, that's a typo. That shouldn't be in there.
I noticed
Okay.
that as well.
Yes.
Any other questions?
So just one quick question, Madam Chair. Do we have items that we're waiting to purchase at this point? Is that why we're asking for additional funds?
This is a proactive measure. We've reached really close to $100,000, and we do have other purchasing needs for furniture through Hahn forthcoming. And so the goal is to get this completed so we can continue with purchasing for the remainder of the year.
Is everyone okay with that? Okay. Can I get a motion?
Madam Chair, I move to recommend council authorize staff to purchase office furniture, equipment, and installation services through the Hahn Company LLC, subject to terms of a cooperative purchase agreement entered into between the Hahn Company LLC and Region 4 Education Service Center through Omnia Partners Public Agencies, if those purchases are made within established budgets and during the term of cooperative agreement.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, motion passes. And that concludes our meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
manual. So they have the stormwater management manual for Western Washington. So our standards need to be equivalent with that. So King County updated theirs to be the same, and then we adopt King County's. So it was kind of a whole